Welcome back to The Explainer. So if you were with us for the last section, you've got a really solid handle on the worker classification framework. You know exactly why classification matters, and you know what those legal tests actually look like. But today, we're taking all that theory and putting it straight into practice. We're going to look at the foundational compliance infrastructure that you absolutely must build before day one. Literally, before anyone is hired, before anyone is engaged, these one-time obligations have to be firmly in place. I want you to imagine a scenario for a second. Your company is exploding with growth. A manager desperately needs extra hands right this minute, so they just rush a hire. They shake hands, the worker starts on Monday, and everyone kind of figures, hey, we'll just handle the paperwork later. I mean, what's the worst that could happen, right? Well, if you skip the foundational setup before that worker steps through the door or logs in, you aren't just creating a little administrative headache. You are walking directly into a minefield.
These are the actual stakes. Missing these pre-engagement steps can trigger criminal liability, it can leave you with completely unenforceable benefit deductions, or it can stick the company with massive retroactive tax obligations. The steps we're covering today are absolutely not just some HR formality. They are strict legal necessities that have to be completed before the very first engagement of either an employee or a contractor. Period.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here is our roadmap for pouring the concrete foundation of a compliant business: planning and decision, classification analysis, mandatory registrations, ERISA and benefits, and finally, the pre-engagement checklist. Starting with Section 1, planning and decision, authorizing the work. The absolute golden rule here is that you have to get documented approval before any recruiting or soliciting ever begins. You just can't go out looking for talent without knowing exactly which track that talent belongs on. Every single workforce engagement begins with two decisions that must be documented up front. If you're going down the employee track, that role has to be approved in the headcount budget, and a position authorization form must be signed. But if you're looking at the contractor track, the scope, the maximum budget, and the business need must be approved, usually by a finance director or someone higher up, and it all goes into a contractor engagement authorization. You've got to clearly separate these streams right from the start. Moving on to Section 2, classification analysis, the legal defense. This is honestly your most consequential step. Figuring out whether a worker is an employee or an independent contractor requires a dedicated analysis applying three very specific tests. Step 1 is the IRS three-part common law test, which looks at behavioral control, financial control, and the type of relationship. Step 2 is the Department of Labor's economic reality test, and that's for any engagement with wage and hour sensitivity under the FLSA. And Step 3 is the applicable state ABC test. This one is especially critical if you have workers in states like California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, or Illinois. Because get this, a contractor might completely pass the IRS test, but totally fail the state test. All three have to be applied where applicable, and any complex or borderline cases need formal legal review before an agreement is ever signed. So why do we put so much intense effort into this memo? Because this classification memo is literally your company's legal defense if the engagement is ever audited. It's a legal determination based entirely on the nature of the work, not just what's convenient for the budget. You can't treat classification as an afterthought. Doing so is the #1 root cause of massive misclassification exposure. Write it out before the engagement begins, because trust me, you cannot effectively reconstruct this defense after the fact. All right, Section 3, mandatory registrations, state and federal requirements. For the employee track, there are specific accounts that absolutely must be active before day one. Let's start with workers' compensation insurance. This is mandatory in virtually all states before your very first employee starts. The premiums are based on payroll by job classification code, which just reflects the injury risk of each specific role. Now, I really need you to listen closely to this one. Failure to carry workers' comp is a criminal offense in most states. It is not merely a civil penalty where you just pay a quick fine and move on. We are talking actual criminal exposure here. Advisors and HR leaders have to verify this coverage status before the first employee starts, never ever after. Now, let's navigate the alphabet soup of this regulatory landscape. I know, it's everyone's favorite part of compliance. First up, you need your federal EIN to withhold and remit taxes. You also need state income tax withholding and state unemployment insurance, or SUI, accounts registered in every single state where your employees will work or reside. Then we get into the state-specific mandates. State disability insurance, or SDI, is required in California, New Jersey, New York, Hawaii, and Rhode Island. Paid family leave, or PFL, is mandated in California, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Colorado, Massachusetts, Oregon, and Washington. Oh, and finally, don't forget the mandatory workplace posters covering FLSA, OSHA, and EEO. Those have to be displayed at every physical worksite or provided electronically if your team is remote. And this brilliantly illustrates a really critical note on this strict boundary. Workers' compensation, SUI, and most of those mandatory employer insurance programs do not apply to properly classified independent contractors. You've got to verify the exact scope of each coverage before you finalize your classification decision, because the two tracks are fundamentally different. Section 4, ERISA and benefits, protecting the plan. So if a company intends to offer benefits, there are some really strict ERISA obligations to follow. Let's talk about a practical nightmare that I like to call the phantom pre-tax. Let's say a company starts deducting an employee's contribution for health insurance, but oops, they haven't actually executed a Section 125 cafeteria plan document yet. Well, without that valid, signed document in place before deductions begin, all of those supposedly pre-tax deductions are totally non-compliant. That means back taxes apply for the poor employee who thought their deduction was saving them money. It is a shockingly common and incredibly costly oversight that completely ruins trust on day one. Now, you might be wondering, what is 9.02%? Under the ACA employer mandate, applicable large employers, which means companies with 50 or more full-time equivalent employees, must offer minimum essential coverage to at least 95% of their full-time staff. And that coverage has to be affordable. For 2023, that means the employee's share for health coverage must not exceed 9.02% of their household income. If your company crosses that 50-employee threshold, this exact math becomes your reality before open enrollment even begins. Beyond health insurance affordability, there are other critical documents that must be fully executed. Your health plan summary plan description, or SPD, has to be prepared. If you've got a 401k, the plan document, the adoption agreement, and the trust agreement must all be completely in place before a single cent is ever contributed. And of course, HIPAA notices of privacy practices must be ready to hand out to all enrollees. Now, let's contrast all of that with our contractor track. Offering benefits to a contractor is a completely radioactive move. You must explicitly exclude independent contractors from all employee benefit plans. Offering a contractor health insurance, 401k access, stock options, a parking pass, or even PTO is one of the strongest indicators of an employment relationship under the IRS type of relationship test. It has to be avoided entirely, and this exclusion needs to be clearly stated right there in their services agreement. And finally, Section 5, the pre-engagement checklist, T-0. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, so let's just bring it all together. Check your buckets. First, is the classification memo documented, and is legal review fully complete for any complex cases? Second, for your employees, is workers' comp active? Is the EIN confirmed? And are all the necessary state accounts actually registered? Third, are all benefit plan documents fully executed if you're offering them? And fourth, for contractors, is the engagement authorization approved and the statement of work ready to go? So the crucial point is, absolutely none of these steps can happen after the worker starts. They all happen before. Okay, so you've done the heavy lifting. The authorizations are signed, your legal defense is thoroughly documented, the insurance is active, and the benefit plans are completely compliant. The foundation is officially built. But now that the stage is perfectly set, what actually happens when that new hire finally walks through the front door? How do you smoothly take them from an accepted offer all the way to their very first compliant paycheck? Well, that is exactly what we are going to explore in our next explainer, covering Section 3. You definitely won't want to miss it. Thanks for joining me today.